We talked a lot about streamliners on this channel, but we're going to talk about it again because why not? Streamlining was the main fashion statement for railroads. Everyone designed sleek, colorful, and fast trains taking patrons from big cities to God knows where. They mostly came with extra fares, less stops, and a lot more luxury. Most streamliners began with streamlined steam locomotives leading the way at high speeds, being replaced by streamlined diesel locomotives by the end of World War II and into the late 1950s. One locomotive in particular was the only one to be streamlined for this railroad, and was funnily named after a literal Greek god. Let's turn over to the Burlington route. It's the middle of the 1930s and they were already a highly respected railroad with their brand new Zephyr train sets. The Zephyrs were high-speed, luxury articulated diesel-powered train sets taking patrons between big cities. Such famous examples include the Pioneer Zephyr and the Mark Twain Zephyr, and of course the Denver Zephyr. Most of the Zephyrs originated from Chicago and went along the Burlington route's main line. Also by the 1930s, they were purchasing newly built steam locomotives. Between 1930 and 1935, they purchased a set of 12 464 Hudsons from Baldwin under the S4 class name. These were meant to be used on high-speed passenger trains. They were numbered between 3000 and 3011 respectively. However, one of these members, number 3002, would receive special treatment, if you will. With the launch of the new Zephyrs, the CB&Q also wanted to experiment with steam power for those trains. Number 3002 was built in 1930. By the later portion of the decade, they also purchased a fleet of the world's first streamlined diesel locomotives, the EMCAs or E1s, and they would also be put on passenger service. However, according to Wikipedia, occasional breakdowns would happen and steam locomotives would need to substitute for them. Those substitutes would typically be non-streamlined and not as fast, which is what made the CB&Q come up with the idea of streamlining one of their Pacifics. By 1937, almost every railroad had at least one streamlined train of some kind. Whether it be mail, commuter, or intercity, it had to be streamlined. The CB&Q still had some, but despite that, in 1937, they took 3002 to their West Burlington shops for a major overhaul. Later that year, 3002 was looking like a silver bullet, literally. The new rebuild came with sharp shrouding, more tractive effort, a new class name, a new number, and a higher top speed. At the time, this was the first steam locomotive to be fully streamlined with stainless steel. Also, according to Wikipedia, the tractive effort was increased to 47,000 pounds. It was reclassified as an S4A rather than keeping the regular S4 name. Its number changed from 3002 to 4000. By this point, the CB&Q had a habit of giving their Zephyr locomotives their own names. However, they were of Greek origin, given that the word Zephyr is also of Greek origin, after Zephyrus, one of the wind gods. Because of this, locomotive number 4000 was given the name, God, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Aeolus. Aeolus in Greek mythology is another wind god. However, this one ruled over the winds that were encountered by Odysseus. They chose the name for this locomotive as another way to signify it was high speed. 4000 was also given the nickname of Big Alice Lagoon as a reference to a character from Popeye. By 1938, locomotive 4000 was used as emergency backup in case one of the Zephyr locomotives broke down. 4000 actually pulled plenty of the Zephyrs, and on some occasions, it pulled other passenger trains like the Black Hawk and the Axar Ben. Now, let's get into the details of this locomotive. 4000 was originally built in 1930 as an S4 Class 464 Hudson locomotive number 3002. It received its streamlined casting in 1937. It weighed around 390,000 pounds and used coal as its fuel source. It had a water capacity of 15,000 US gallons and a boiler pressure of 250 psi. It ran on 78-inch driver wheels and had a tractive effort of 47,676 pounds, which gave the locomotive a high top speed of 105 miles per hour. However, there are very little sources proving it ever went that fast in service. The streamlined shrouding of Aeolus was unfortunately short-lived, as by 1939, World War II broke out across Europe, and it was only a matter of time before America had to step in. The shrouding was removed in 1941 as a contribution to the war effort, according to Argusrail. However, the locomotive still wasn't done. Aeolus and its sisters actually stuck around for a while longer after the Second World War, although Aeolus was eventually renumbered back to 3002. The CB&Q completely dieselized by 1955, which was when the S4s were already retired. By 1960, most of the S4s were being cut up and dismantled, save for 5 that miraculously survived. 3002, along with 3001, 3007, 3003, and 3006 were all headed to different railroad museums across the country. 3001 went to the city of Ottumwa, Iowa in '59, celebrating 100 years since the first train went through there on the Burlington and Missouri Railroad, again according to Argusrail. It was put on display next to the current Amtrak station. 3007 was donated to the Illinois Railway Museum, 3003 was donated to the city of Burlington, Iowa in 1961, and 3006 was donated to Galesburg, Illinois in 1962, and is on display at the Galesburg Railroad Museum. Finally, 3002 was donated to the city of La Crosse, Wisconsin by 1963. It's still on display at the Copeland Park part of the city, and it doesn't look all that good of a condition if you ask me, but we should be grateful it even survived past the scrapper's torch. Just before retirement, 4000 actually ran a little-known excursion train out of Chicago as a railfan special in 1956. According to Wikipedia, the locomotive also pulled another trip out of Chicago on September 2nd of that year. With the success of the early fan trips, the CB&Q's president, Harry C. Murphy, eventually decided to start a steam excursion program on the railroad that would last until it was cancelled by the new president in 1966. Despite the earlier fan trips, 4000 did not take part in the steam program. Anyway, as said earlier, 3002 along with 4 of its sisters were all preserved while the remainder were unfortunately scrapped. Most of the trains it pulled wound up being discontinued about a decade after most of the S4s were scrapped. Despite 3002 no longer having its lovely streamlined shrouding, it's still one of the very few examples of X-streamlined and or streamlined steam locomotives that have been preserved in the US. In my opinion, it's one of the more unique members of the CB&Q's steam fleet. CB&Q 4000 was a high-speed streamlined steam locomotive that was the only one of its kind on the railroad it served on, save for 4001, which was given the same shrouding and the same Aeolus name. The CB&Q would merge into the Burlington Northern Railway in 1970, and it would later become BNSF by 1995. Nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed this story about a unique survivor of one of America's most iconic fallen flags. Thank you all for watching this video, and I'll see you all next time. Have a great day.